and so now I have a mower that doesn't work, and why did he allow this little thing into my life? Like, this is the only day of the week I might be. You understand the line of reasoning. And you run into people who ask these kinds of questions on a day-to-day basis. And so I think it's kind of the onus is on us as Christians to be able to answer those kinds of questions that is a little bit fuller than just simply, oh, God's in control, and then leaving it at that. I mean, that is true. It is true that God is in control. That's not an untrue statement. But at times, when it comes to very serious occurrences in life, that might seem like just a platitude. It feels like an empty answer to a lot of people. And they really want to know more. They want to know, well, but why? Why does God do this? And I mentioned the last time that we were in Ecclesiastes that God is not beholden to give us all of his reasons and all of his answers for everything that happens in life. And that in and of itself, yes, at a... Well, he promises that he will give us a way out in temptation. And he promises that he will be with us. And I think it goes back to that poem, right? The poem of the footprints in the sand. Like there was one set, and then during the hard time, or two sets, and you were with me, and then a hard time came in, and it was just one set. Why did you leave me? Well, I didn't leave you. I was carrying you, right? Like, I'm with you, but I'm also giving you the strength that you don't even know that you had. Sometimes those aren't things that we perceive readily and might be retrospective, right? We look back, and then, of course, there's the cartoon that says, and that long trench right there is when I dragged you, kicking and screaming. But no, you're right. God is with us, and it's not that he doesn't give us things that we can't handle, because he does. He does give us things that we can't handle. But really, at the end of the day, it's that God sustains us. And I think that really is what marvelously gives us a glimpse into the goodness and the constancy of God. That God will always be who he is. And in every circumstance, he sustains me. So there's that side of things coming into our life that are out of our control, that we can't do anything about. But what about the things that are in our control? What about the things that we do have influence over? What about those things? And so the big question in verse 9 in chapter 3 was, what gain has a worker from his toil? So here is something that a man is doing. This is an action that he has complete control over. What gain is there if God is sovereign, is really the idea. Well, his conclusion in that is summarized really in verse 13, that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in his toil. This is God's gift to man. So we can enjoy the fruits of our labor, and we see that as a biblical principle, that the ox, when he treads out the grain, you should not muzzle it because he gets to enjoy some of the fruits of his labor. Or you reap what you sow is another good example, because that is both good and bad. That's not always negative. That's a good and bad thing. You reap goodness when you sow goodness, and you reap evil when you sow evil. So that we see in life, it seems that from our perspective, well, maybe that's all there is to life, that there's just what I get from what I put out. And I should just enjoy the good things when they come. But we're going to see that he actually doesn't just end there. He moves past that very simplistic observation into a very complex argument. It's a logical argument that he's setting forth, but he does it really brilliantly, and it's not super obvious when you're reading through it. It's really humbling, by the way, when you're reading something written by Solomon, because you just realize just how smart he is. Solomon is really, really brilliant in the way he observes the world, and he's really brilliant also in how he brings us to come to understand that, because he's asking questions that we've all asked, and he's bringing up things that we've all seen. He's just like, hey, you've seen this, haven't you? Like, oh, yeah, we've seen that. And you've thought, man, what's the point? Yeah, I have thought that. Somebody came in earlier today, homeless. It almost always happens on a Wednesday. It's weird. But a homeless gal that I haven't seen for a couple years was here, and she was kind of going through, and we had clothing and always able to give them water and some resources and some reading material. And it's overwhelming when you meet with people that you see their problems that are just so big. And you've got like 10 minutes with them. And you know that you can't solve everything. You know that you can't hit every major thing. And so you always go right to the gospel. That's the main thing. But they're asking these questions. What's the point? What's my purpose? Why am I even here? Why does God let these things happen to me? And you're trying to answer these questions in a timely manner, but how do you get really down to it? And here we have, just in these few verses, a very incredibly well thought through argument about how we can know certain things. What he's going to focus on in these verses in 16 through 22 is, and building on everything he said before, is basically justice. He wants us to understand that God is going to judge the wicked, and that we can actually know that simply by observing the world we live in. And so I have written down, and this actually doesn't give the conclusion because the argument itself actually draws the conclusion. But let's read through this first after I read this big idea. The big idea is this: we can know that God will judge the wicked. Well, how can we know that? How can anybody actually know that? Just by looking out and observing, because he already talked about the power of observation, and he drops these two I knows: I know this, I know that. And then he's going to build on that. But let's go ahead and read verses 16 through 22. He said, "Moreover, I saw under the sun that in the place of justice even there was wickedness, and in the place of righteousness even there was wickedness." So in places, in institutions that we would immediately think that, well, there should be righteousness and there should be justice in these areas. Like, let's take the Supreme Court or our justice system, or within the church. I mean, you might have heard recently that the Southern Baptist Convention is being targeted by the DOJ, and they're doing a very thorough investigation about the allegations of sexual abuse within the SBC. This was such a big problem that they actually hired an outside group to come in and basically investigate, spent millions of dollars on it to get rid of all the corruption that was in the SBC. Now, we were tempted to say, well, I mean, that's the SBC, there's a large organization, but, I mean, we're part of the GARB. There's nothing wrong with the GARB, right? Everything is righteous and good and just. Well, no, that's not the case. No organization, because mankind is free from wickedness and unrighteousness. It's just that we would expect that to be there. And that's really what his point is that when I look into places of justice, I don't see justice all the time. I actually observe wickedness. And when I go to the place that you expect righteousness, well, I see wickedness there too. So he's bringing us, and we observe this as well, right? Like, wow, we see corrupt pastors, and we see corrupt Supreme Court justices, and we see corruption in all the places, all these institutions that ought to be. So